Thank you for joining in on this discussion today on how to plan a successful cloud migration. Before we get started, I just wanted to go over a few logistical reminders. We will be recording this session today, and anyone who registers for this event will receive a link to the recording within 24 hours. If you have any questions during today's webinar, please let us know in the chat. As time permits, we'll address questions during and at the end of the webinar. But if we don't get to your question, we can follow up with you after today's session. The cloud journey is such a great topic and one we enjoy discussing where we've been and some things we've learned along the way. But even more than that, we'd like to apply what we've learned to help you solve for your challenges. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we don't touch on something that's of great importance to you, or you want to dive deeper on a topic, please don't hesitate to reach out. My name is Dan Rice. I'm Product Marketing Manager here at Lyniate, and today I'm excited to have with me two of our subject matter experts as it pertains to the cloud journey as panelists, Tom Myers and Seth Rosenberg. Tom, Seth, would you both give a quick introduction of yourselves for the audience today?
Very well. Nice to meet you all. My name is Tom Myers, based out of lovely St. Paul, Minnesota, where we're under about 9 inches of snow this morning, or this afternoon, I guess. I've been with Lyniate about 2 years. I'm the vice president of our global solution consulting team, and I have a deep background in the radiology space historically, and I really look forward to the conversation today about how we can help you look at what your journey to the cloud looks like and where the planning and the roadmap looks like to fit that in as well. So joined today by Seth Rosenberg, if you'd like to say hi, Seth.
Hello friends, Seth Rosenberg here, solution consultant at Lyniate, celebrating my 10th year this year, working with the Rhapsody interoperability suite. I work on Tom's team with a bunch of awesome pros and assist friends and things like this. So looking forward to chatting with you today as well.
Awesome, thanks Cash for the introduction. Well, for our agenda today, we're going to cover a few things in our short time together. We're going to talk about a brief overview of our cloud architecture as it relates to Rhapsody as a service in particular. Tom and Seth will walk us through evaluating deployment options and finding the right fit for your organization. And then we'll share a few of our best practices and proven methods we've used for success making the transition to the cloud. So let's talk a little bit about Lyniate in the cloud. Some 5 years after our first Rhapsody as a service customer, today we serve 118 customers and counting in the cloud, with over 33 added in the last year. And now, here in 2023, we have a fully cloud-capable interoperability suite to help complement and address other needs beyond traditional integration related to identity and semantic interoperability. So we've been busy. And through this process, we've completed AWS well-architected reviews, external penetration testing, and have been certified by multiple groups as it pertains to the way we secure our customers' information in PHI. So now I'd like to hand it over to Tom for him to talk about our Rhapsody as a service architecture.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. From a very high level, many of you on the call are familiar with traditional Rhapsody architectures and how that integration engine fits into an environment. So we've really taken the core concepts there around multiple environments, production and non-production environments that are now running instead of on your local infrastructure, available via the AWS cloud infrastructure in your own dedicated virtual private cloud. So it handles many of the same types of connectivity and resources and routes that you'd be used to in a traditional Rhapsody environment, but now doing those through the networking available within AWS. So handling traditional HL7 v2 messages, MLLP communication, now being able to extend that into supporting TLS capabilities as well, and handling things like web services and REST APIs. So the same types of connectivity that you're used to, but now hosted in the cloud and available. On top of that, we're adding our capabilities around our 24/7 Lyniate-backed infrastructure and security monitoring. So we're keeping and paying attention to the system as it's running, the infrastructure, the environment, and the making sure that the lights are on and everything's humming along the way that it should, while giving you and your team the ability to monitor that from anywhere in the way that you're used to today. For the web management console, whatever those endpoints would be that you'd like to keep active, the same REST APIs for integration, all of those things as well. And additionally, using the same paradigms that you're used to for developing and testing locally. So you use the same IDE environment that you're used to in traditional Rhapsody, but now you can do that and connect to the remote Rhapsody server running within the AWS environment. So architecturally, many of the things are similar to what you would expect in a robust environment today that you would deploy in your own cloud or in your own on-prem environment. But now we've added additional services around that monitoring and management, focused on really keeping track of the logs, keeping track of the way that things are deployed so that they're repeatable, deploying it really as a deployment as code stack, leveraging many of the modern tools that are available in a cloud environment to benefit these deployments as well, while also leveraging many of the aspects of the AWS infrastructure as well. So that's really built to be something robust and available. Moving forward, this is not the topic of the webinar today, but I really wanted to give a little highlight about the growth Lyniate has gone through and some of the things that we're focused on as we move into the future. So the conversation today is moving into the cloud. The conversation of tomorrow will be, how do we help you with these core tenets of how we relate to the data in the pipeline as it flows? First one being connectivity around Rhapsody and CorePoint engines from an integration standpoint, leveraging the connections that you're used to today in your on-prem environments and expanding those in the future as well. Expanding that to classification, so taking the data that you have from a terminology basis and then allowing you to normalize that and morph that data into more consumable and more portable formats, complying with things like reporting systems and quality systems that you may have either through external services or your own internal departments as well. And then moving into consistency of identity and cleanliness of data, where the identity services and the provider registries really look at individuals regardless of the role that they play in the care delivery cycle. In one case, a person could be a patient, and in another case, the person could also be a provider as well. And we can uniquely identify and have a consistent view of who that person is as an identity, and then expanding that out and taking the core data that you're transforming and moving in those environments and classifying and cleaning, and also connecting and sharing those now. So leveraging the Rapid API gateway to share that same core data out with your partners in a secure and predictable way, allowing flexibility of management of those APIs in a way that is really not that doable in traditional tool sets today. So moving the suite along, we're really focused on the same commitment to delivery and whether cloud or on-prem, as a managed service or a limited infrastructure only, whatever that would be. And then keeping focused on being adaptable and modular so that you only really need to deploy what you need to for the problem you're focused on solving. And all of that is done with the focus on customer quality and service. As a whole, the interoperability suite is really positioned as something that helps you in the pipeline of data as it moves through the environment to support a lot of different workflows. We're not going to get into too much detail on this. This is another perspective on the same discussion previously, focusing on a variety of things, traditional pipelines, new DICOM type pipelines, depending on what you're trying to do, reconciliation of patient demographics for identity management, and then code management, and specifically terminology and code lookups for cross communication and transformation of those clinical data payloads into reporting structures. And then eventually moving all of the data into the new world of clinical data repositories, whether that's a local FHIR server or a cloud FHIR server or a cloud-hosted data lake or XDS document repository. It can be a variety of sources, but we can help you with providing an API gateway to provide security and management of that, both for inbound and outbound traffic as well. So lots of options. We can talk about that in other webinars, which we'll be happy to, but wanted to give you a little overview of a flavor of what's coming and where we're heading organizationally as well. With that, we'd like to shift back into the conversation around your cloud migration. So where do you consider your organization in its cloud migration journey? So we'd like you to respond to the poll if you have the time, and we'd love your perspective on where you are in that. So if you're just in discussions or already executing and the balloon is lifted off the ground, so to speak, wherever you happen to be, or you're almost there already, we'd love to hear about it. So please take a moment and reply to the poll. We'll give it about 30 seconds here, and then we'll check in on the results and see where the team is that's on the call today and how they feel about it. How are we doing on results? Are they coming in? And maybe we'll give it that. Looks like we have some results.
Excellent.
So very good. It's interesting to see the breadth as well around discussions and executing as well. But also there's those who are still focused on their on-prem solutions as well. So we welcome the feedback and perspective. Feel free to chime in with other questions in the chat. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Seth.
Hello, friends. So Tom and Dan were introducing kind of these cloud concepts. So I'm going to take it a bit further and talk to you a little bit about the different flavors of deployment of the engine that we have, starting with, what you're classically familiar with and introducing a few new concepts. We're then going to talk about the different steps you might take when you are perhaps migrating or thinking about that migration. And we'll also be talking about, just in general, some of the things we can do to make our environments run a little healthier. Excuse me. So starting here in this chart, what we're going to be doing is laying out the kind of 4 different flavors that we have for deploying our services. So as noted here in the orange, that's kind of representative of you, the customer, and blue is of us, the Lyniate team. So this first column, interoperability deployed by you, this is the classic on-premises paradigm, right? So this is where you, friends, are hosting the engine, be it in your own data center, your own AWS, GCP, Azure, what have you. And it is you guys who, currently have the primary custody of both the interface infrastructure and the interface development. So when I say infrastructure, I'm meaning things like you guys are the ones creating the server, giving it resources, setting up the firewall rules, the VPNs, ensuring you've got disaster recovery and all that stuff in place. And from the interface side, you guys are also the ones building, monitoring, and managing the actual Rhapsody interfaces, the messages that flow through them day to day, and any errors that might occur. So that one you're pretty classically familiar with, but it's always good to just remind everybody. And this brings us to a second type of deployment. So this is interop as a hybrid solution. So this has come about as a way to assist some of our customers in supplementing new workflows or perhaps mergers and acquisitions or certain things you might not have time for. In this paradigm, you would perhaps be still running your own primary engine in your own data center or private cloud, supporting it, building, monitoring, managing, etc. But in addition to that, you could conscript us to deploy an engine on your behalf and run, say, claims interfaces that you weren't as familiar with, or if you've acquired a new health system and they're on a different EMR and a different engine and you don't want to deal with that yet, right? That's the type of thing that we could step in to assist on. So in that hybrid solution, we have a couple of different deployment options, one of which I'll be introducing to you here shortly. It's a very cool new one known as the Trust Grid, which is allowing us to solve all sorts of really cool problems, especially in non-United States jurisdictions. So getting to our third column here, this is the interop service that Lyniate has been providing, as mentioned, for about the last 5 years. We can think of it as a partially managed service, otherwise known as Rhapsody as a service. In this Rhapsody as a service, we are going to be the ones hosting that engine. So in the diagram Tom showed earlier, where you saw the AWS VPC and the suites of engines and stuff, that's what that's going to look like. So we will be deploying the infrastructure, handling all of the firewall rules, VPNs, disaster recovery, security, endpoint monitoring, etc. Now, in this paradigm, we never have access to the application nor to your data layer. So your data is still entirely your own. Your interfaces are still entirely your own. And we hand you the keys to the application where you would then, kind of still go as you've classically been, right? So you'll get in the Rhapsody IDE, you'll be building your interfaces, monitoring, managing, and maintaining them. So for this paradigm, I like to imagine it's 2 in the morning on production support, and we've got a couple of different alerts that come in. The first alert is that a VPN tunnel went down, or perhaps, the garbage collection is causing memory issues. Those are the infrastructure type alerts that we're going to get and dispatch. We're monitoring 24/7, 365 with a 99.9% uptime SLA. So we would respond to that. Now let's imagine on that same night, somebody sends you message data. It's totally cool and accepted at the protocol level. Authentication works, all that good stuff. It gets into the engine and then it fails validation, right? Maybe somebody sent you garbage data, segments aren't where they're supposed to be, it's the wrong file format, whatever. That goes to the error queue and is traditionally still handled by you friends. So your day-to-day operation at the application level really doesn't change. Now, in this final paradigm, interoperability as a fully managed service, we can think of this as fully managed Rhapsody. It is aptly named Lyniate Envoy. So when you hear friends talk about the Lyniate Envoy service, the easiest way to think about that in your brain is it's a fully managed Rhapsody with the ability then to tack on any of those additional services that Tom was talking about, like the semantic or syntactic interoperability with the EMPI or the health term. So in this paradigm, we're going to host the engine. We're going to do all the infrastructure stuff just like Rhapsody as a service, but we are also going to build, monitor, and manage your interfaces. So this means that, effectively we are your project team, we are your interface team, and it allows you to then, focus your efforts elsewhere. So I'll go on to the next slide. And what I like to kind of highlight with this, right? So as mentioned, we've been successfully helping our customers do interoperability in the cloud for 5, almost 6 years now. I think it'll be in the spring. And as such, we have a few customers that have been with us for a long and successful journey. And so one of our first customers and perhaps largest cloud customers, University of Louisville Health. And so Darren has been kind enough to speak at certain events and participate in case studies and all these other things. And these were his observations about, when you might move to the cloud, the different things you're going to want to consider. So first and foremost, things like hardware capacity and costs, right? What does it cost you to deploy a server? Are you using AWS? Do you have price breaks with them for enterprise level stuff, etc.? Other things to consider is once you have that, perhaps AWS footprint, do you have the skill set to utilize it to its full potential, taking advantage of all of the tools, the scaling, the disaster recovery, all of that good stuff. And in addition to that, right, we know the labor market these days has been a little bit tough and it can be hard to find and retain talent. So, we do know friends are seeing their interface teams, move from spot to spot. And as such, you may find yourself supporting interfaces that friends built years ago, that you're just not quite up to speed on. And as such, if you're looking to kind of offload those, that can be a really good opportunity as well. So Darren was kind enough to participate in a couple of interviews, case studies, white papers, etc. And as you can see, there's a little link in this PowerPoint to a reference guide. It's going to have a lot of great information on all of the different things you're going to want to consider. But at a high level, you really want to think physical, staffing, and infrastructure. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. So one of the best parts about Lyniate, if you ask me, is not only our Jammin' products, but the fact that the teams who support them, build them, and work with them are really awesome, highly tenured teams of dedicated professionals. So anybody who ever, comes into contact with your engine, be it an implementation architect or a cloud services member, somebody like that, They are all Rhapsody Professional Certified or CorePoint L3 certified. I know this audience isn't very much CorePoint centric, but nonetheless, you can be sure that we're sure that those people are expertly trained. The other really great thing about these products that have been in the market for a long time is the teams have been in the market with them for a long time. Right now on our Rhapsody team, we're averaging about 8 to 9 years worth of tenure, and similar, more like 6 or 7 on the CorePoint side. But that means the friends who come into your environment to assist you are tried and true, right? They're not green. They've done hundreds, if not thousands, of different implementations over their careers, working with endpoints of all different shapes and sizes, allowing us to really help be the Sherpa for your cloud migration. And then that's all kind of led off by some of our friends like Tom and our other cloud leadership like Kevin Day, et cetera, who have a combined more than 30 years of experience in healthcare IT leadership and running these types of softwares as a service to ensure that the operations are not only built well from the ground up, but then being run well as well. So now that we know what the options are for the footprints, we know why we might move, we know who might be doing that move, now we talk about the move itself. So we kind of think of these things as having 4 basic phases. So there's the discovery phase, standard requirements gathering. We'll work with you to understand what you've got going on in your environment, which is going to lead us to a concept called the health check, which we'll be introducing here in a few minutes. But the idea here is that we will prioritize your requirements, understand what you've got going on, and get a full picture of what will be migrated. Now, in phase 2, we're looking at the build. Now, the lovely thing about a Rhapsody to Envoy or even a Rhapsody to Rhapsody as a service migration is we don't really need to reinvent the wheel. I'm sure your professionals and your teams have spent hundreds, dozens, even thousands of hours building your interfaces, tweaking them, supporting them, getting them to accommodate your nuance. And as such, right, when we look to bring that into our cloud, we may be doing a bit of optimization on it, but it's not going to be a need to start from scratch. So then we'll do all of the different mappings, make sure that everything is built out from an environment standpoint, replicated, etc. And finally, we will manage the cutover in a methodology we refer to as the bubble method, which we'll also be talking about in a little bit. So as I mentioned, part of phase 1 is the health check. So, in that poll earlier, right, I think it was split pretty evenly between, we're kind of considering this and on our way. And then I think there was about a 25% of friends that said, we're not really ready to move to the cloud yet. Well, that's all well and good, but we still want you to know about this health check operation, because it's not only something that we do when we like to migrate a customer from the on-premise to the cloud, it's also something that's available to any and all of our customers to help you tune your environment. So a health check is typically a 40 to 80 hour services engagement led by some of our Rhapsody professional architects. And they will meet with you and review your environment, review your workflows, your Rhapsody routes, your mappers, etc. And they will help you with route optimization or fixing gnarly routes. If you have any bottlenecks or issues, they can help identify performance enhancements, things like that. And they can also ensure best practices and new features are being used, right? It's not uncommon for some of our customers to sit on an older version for a couple of years, 6.4, 6.5, etc. And as part of this health check, we can be looking at functionality maybe you've done in a JavaScript or in a mapper or something that now there's a dedicated filter or function for that maybe performs a little bit better, so we can identify those things as well. So like I said, we'll do this in tandem with the migration, but for that quarter of you attending today that are still thinking, what, I'm cool with my on-premise, we still advise, contact your account manager, talk about a health check, because tuning that engine is never a bad idea. But in general, when we're doing that migration, it's, we're already touching things, moving things, breaking things, fixing things, etc. So it's a great time to also kind of give the configuration a makeover. Now, skipping around a little bit before we kind of circle and bring it on home, I did want to talk a little bit about that trust grid, that hybrid environment that I was talking about earlier in the second column of that chart. So we've had customers come to us with the need to have a fully managed interoperability service deployed elsewhere. So not in our cloud, but say perhaps on a customer's network or a customer's network, right? Kind of taking that a step further. So we have teamed up with a really cool company out of Austin, Texas called TrustGrid. Now, TrustGrid is a secure network appliance that can come as either a physical or a software installation. So you can have a hardware or a software. And it allows us to have a zero trust connection between our network and a given customer's network. So the idea is that we can securely create a bridge between those components. And then from there, we essentially run the trust grid like a VM on you or the customer's network in order to then facilitate whatever needs to happen. So Dan, I'm going to have you hit the next slide here. This is actually a diagram of something we've got going on for some of our customers right now. We have a customer in Germany who, for example, had the need to de-identify data before sending it to the primary cloud. And as such, this was achieved by deploying a TrustGrid node with a containerized, fully managed Rhapsody on it. We have the access to handle all of that. And using that Rhapsody on the customer's network, we do de-identification, we save to a local database, and we send to the cloud with some metadata. And then when that metadata is returned with the analysis, we remarry it and send it back into the EMR. So the idea here is that in this hybrid model, we can deploy all over the place, your customer's network, your own network, etc., to provide interoperability that can help be more stringent with the different, European Union privacy laws or customer policies or anything like that. And Tom, I'm going to pause here, just open it up, see if you have any fun TrustGrid color commentary.
No, it's just a really valuable option for the case where you either need to ensure the data does not leave the four walls of the owner of the data, for those use cases where you want to apply those transformations and integration pieces, but not necessarily leveraging the raw data moving in and out of the cloud itself. So it's a great bridge mechanism and a great hybrid to support those specialized use cases. Just as a call out, this is often a use case that can also be leveraged for very large data types, so things like DICOM data that may be included or maybe a requirement as you're integrating. It's a great way to handle those use cases as well. So hit it right on the head otherwise, so thanks, Seth.
Awesome. So we'll head on now to the next slide. So again, 5 years in, we are becoming much more cloud native as such, right? At the beginning, we were really only supporting like VPNs and SSL, ACL whitelisting. But now we have a host of cloud forward options for network to network authentication, again, both to connect with you and with your customers. So classically, we can do SSL certificates in tandem with firewall rules. We can also do classic VPN IPsec tunnels, but taking a step further, we can use things like Direct Connect, AWS Private Link, VPC peering, the Transit Gateway, the Trust Grid, etc. So we have, vastly expanded our network-to-network authentication options, and as such, can ultimately facilitate and manage whatever connectivity you need out to your customers. So Dan, that'll take us on to the next one. So now, I also mentioned we would be talking about how the actual cutover happens. So this is what we refer to as the bubble method. And we can think of it in three kind of basic stages. So in the first stage, what we're going to do is we're going to stick the cloud engine right next to the legacy engine, or in line with it. They might be on different networks. And the idea is that the upstream system is still going to have its network connectivity to the legacy engine. The legacy engine is going to get the message and process it and send it downstream. But simultaneously, it's also going to send a pre-processed version of that message to our cloud engine, where we will process it the same. We'll then do a compare and diff of the outputs of the two engines. We'll do this for an agreed upon duration, typically somewhere in the 1 to 3 weeks range. And when we run that diff, if we have a 0% diff, then we're good to go for stage 2. And if we find that there are differences in the outputs of the message, we will go back, investigate, and iterate over that to fix it. So once we're good on stage 1, we're going to think about the second phase. So the second phase involves us still using the primary network connectivity to the legacy engine, but the legacy engine is no longer going to be doing primary processing. So the upstream engine will connect to the legacy engine. It will send a message to it, and that pre-processed message will be forwarded to the cloud engine, where it is fully processed and sent to the downstream. So one at a time, right? We're not going to try and take too much on. We like to increment things. So we'll establish network connectivity and authentication with the downstream engine, downstream data destination, and ensure that that's all in place. But in stage 2, we're still using the network information for the legacy engine. Now, finally, we will take it to stage 3 after an agreed upon period of time, where we will actually remove the legacy engine from processing. We'll send it copies of the message, but it's not going to do anything other than receive those copies of the message. Otherwise, the upstream system will go ahead and send directly to the cloud deployed engine, where all normal processing will happen and will be sent downstream. Now, the reason we send copies of that message to the legacy engine is we will keep it there for, say, an additional 30 days, just in case something does go bump in the night, or we do perhaps need to revert to that. We've never encountered that need, but again, just out of best practice and safety, it is wise to keep it around for much longer than we ever might think we'd need it. So after cutover, we can think about what the project looks like as a whole. So this is kind of typical for any given set of interfaces or workflows when we are either migrating them or building them from scratch. I've seen it go as fast as 2 weeks. I've seen it take as long as a quarter. It very much just does depend on the availability of resources, not really from our team, but from the customer or the customer's customer. So on the Lyniate side, you're going to get an engagement manager and a dedicated team of friends. So these guys are going to be the ones who are with you from your first set of interfaces all the way till the end. And as such, they'll be static and then intimately familiar with your nuance and your environment. So it's not like a rotating ticket system where just like the next person picks up your interface and they might be kind of dropping in blind. All of those projects will be assigned to friends that are familiar with you and your interface. So you will have the engagement manager as your single point of contact, the integration engineers as your Rhapsody architects, the cloud team doing network, infrastructure, DR, stuff like that. And then the support team are your standard support friends that you know and love and you've been working with for the duration of your Rhapsody engagement. On the customers team, we typically work with application engineers and HL7/clinical analysts to link up on the data side, and network and infrastructure friends to do things like key exchange, certificate exchange, VPNs, etc. So we'll do requirements and planning. Then we will spin up the environment and establish your network connectivity. And then we will build out the interfaces. Now, again, if we're migrating, that build is more of like an RLC port with a health check cleanup rather than a start from scratch. So there is a lot of efficiency gained there. But if you did need us to build something net new for you, that would be totally defined and worked out in a project plan. Lastly, we'll test it and then we'll take it live. And again, depending on the footprint you choose, the fully or the partially managed, the definition of live is a little bit different, but nonetheless, we'll get you there. So when we're thinking about the next steps in our cloud journey, it's never too early to start planning. Talk to your organizations. It seems like you guys, a good chunk of you are already in discussions. Myself, Tom, Dan, your Lyniate account manager, anybody with a Lyniate email domain is always happy to talk to you about anything pertaining to you, your Rhapsody, your account, your questions, your comments, your concerns. So please don't ever hesitate to grab us. We are here to be your consulting arm and to be your trusted expert. Schedule a health check, even if you have no plans to migrate to the cloud. I've seen health checks come in and drastically turn around some otherwise gnarly Rhapsody situations. So if you've got some interfaces that were maybe built by somebody 10 years ago and you're afraid to touch them and you want to modernize them or something like that, that's where we'll come in and be of a big help. But also, again, during the migration, a makeover never hurt when we were in flight. And then lastly, the sooner you let us know, the faster we can help you. So again, let us get involved. We're happy to participate in discussions with your team, again, more like consultatively, but then, when you're ready to move, we're here to help. So Tom, Dan, I'll turn it back over to you for any last minute color thoughts.
All right. Thank you, Seth. It was great. Before we close, and we do have time to take a couple of questions, echoing on what Seth just said, we'd invite you to come make the journey with us, leverage our environment that has been designed with security, scalability, resiliency in mind, and collaborate with our experts to build out a plan. So at that point, you can reallocate your time and effort, you can accelerate your roadmap, and you can be able to easily scale and be future focused for whatever may come your way. So I guess let's check the chat. Do we have any questions in the chat, guys?
I think there was a single question.
So I've got a second.
I can read the question if that works, Dan.
Yeah, if you don't mind.
The high-level question was, do you plan on supporting Azure? How do you handle customers that have their data already in other cloud platforms? So in general, we currently provide our hosting infrastructure that we manage for the Rhapsody as a service or the Envoy offerings in AWS. That's the decided cloud platform that we chose. We've been very happy with that. They're robust and very flexible, and it's been a great experience so far. However, we do also support cross connections. So any other cloud provider that you may have data or data services residing in, we can happily interconnect to those, whether that's through secure point-to-point connections or through bridging or whatever that would be. There's lots of options and how that can happen. We'd be happy to talk to you about what your needs are there and how that can be catered to craft the solution that you're looking to achieve.
All right. Well, thank you, Tom, for addressing that. I couldn't quite get the screen up. So just to close out notes, as we said at the beginning, a recording will be available within 24 hours. Really appreciate you all for joining. And again, if you have any more questions or other things that come to mind later, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time.
Take care, friends. Thank you so much.